Hello, and welcome to the John Ark Show. Today, we're going to interview Dr. Shawn Baker. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and he's a world-renowned expert on the carnivore diet, and he's an advocate of it. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, and follow us. We're going to have a lot of great celebrity interviews coming up, so I encourage you to click on that notification bell so you can be notified every time we upload a new episode. I'd also like to tell you about a service called HollywoodIsCalling.com. It's a great service that allows you to purchase live phone calls from your favorite celebrities. So check it out. It's something you can buy as a gift for yourself or for somebody you care about. A live 15-second call is $19.95 and a 30-second call is $29.95. So give it a try. HollywoodIsCalling.com. Now, let's say hello to Dr. Shawn Baker. Hello, Shawn. Welcome to the John Ark Show. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So let's begin by having you tell our audience, what does it mean to practice a carnivore diet from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, so when I talk about this, I often describe it as a diet that focuses on animal-based nutrition. That's the foundation of the diet. Plant foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, whatever, are either limited or fully eliminated as needed to end up with hopefully optimal health.
And what do you usually have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner each day? I'm guessing it's meat.
Yeah, so I usually eat 2 meals a day, and I've had both of my meals already. It's about 1 p.m., so I just finished my second meal. My breakfast was 2 steaks, and my lunch was 2 steaks. That's a pretty typical day for me.
Interesting. Well, with salt or seasoning of some sort, I presume?
Yeah, I put a little salt on there. Yeah, I cooked it up in tallow, which is beef fat, and was quite tasty.
So let's go into the past for a bit. And at some point in your life, I'm assuming you were dissatisfied with things and you decided you were going to try this diet. What caused you? What triggered that?
Well, that was kind of the culmination of about almost a decade-long journey looking at the health. I mean, I am right now in my mid-50s. By my early 40s, I saw my health starting to decline. This is despite being a competitive athlete. I've been a world champion athlete in a number of sports, and I'm still training very hard in my 40s. But despite that, I saw my health not doing what it was supposed to be. I had things like sleep apnea, hypertension, pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome. All those things are starting to occur. And so at that point, despite training extremely hard every day, and in the middle of a busy orthopedic surgical practice, I decided to start looking into nutrition more. And that led me through a series of different dietary strategies. The first was a very low fat, heavy plant, fiber-based diet with just a little lean protein, which is much as what many people would recommend. And I was able to lose weight that way. I was able to get leaner, but I was just flat out miserable on that. I couldn't sustain that. I was hungry, irritable all the time. I decided that's not something for me. Moved on to more of a Paleolithic style of diet, and then finally into a low carb, a ketogenic diet. And then just a little under 5 years ago, found this fully carnivorous diet. And I thought I'd give that a try. I did that for 30 days, and I felt fantastic. It was really sort of eye-opening to me. These things that sort of chronic issues that I'd had my whole life and just kind of went away. And at the end of 30 days, I went back to my regular, more omnivorous diet, and within 24 hours, those issues came back. And so I clearly connected those to being food related and went back on the fully carnivorous diet and basically been on that ever since.
And were you a big carb eater early on, a lot of processed carbs before all of this, or just, normal?
I was a big food eater. I mean, I was 6'5", close to 300 pounds. I was a strength athlete. I was a Highland Games world champion. I was throwing big, heavy things. I just ate a lot of food. I ate probably easily 8,000, maybe as much as 10,000 calories in a day. Some of it was carbohydrate. I didn't eat a lot of what most people would consider junk food. I mean, it was a lot of yogurt and whole grain cereals and fruits and vegetables and, plenty of meat. Sometimes I'd have a little bit of dessert and stuff in there, but it wasn't, I didn't subsist on junk food. I ate a lot of what most people would consider real whole healthy foods.
So I know that you were a weightlifter. Give us a sense for some of the metrics some of the weight that you were able to lift prior to going on the carnivore? And how did the carnivore diet affect your strength as a weightlifter when
Yeah,
you
so
were on the
I've
diet?
been lifting weights for, gosh, over 40 years now. I started when I was a 13-year-old kid. I'm 54 now. And, back in my early 30s, the deadlift is kind of the event that I always excelled with. And so the deadlift is just picking the bar up from the ground. And I ended up being able to lift 350 kilograms or 772 pounds back when I was 30. That was a peak strength. That was when I was about 300 pounds. When I slimmed down to about 230 pounds, 240 pounds, and I maintained that for quite a long time before going on a carnivore diet. And one of the things I was looking at was deadlifting 400 or 405 pounds. I wanted to do it for 20 repetitions, and I never could get past about 15. I get stuck at that every time. I did try that for many, many years. When I turned 50, I had just been on the carnivore diet for a few months, went back and tried to lift the weights again. And literally the first attempt, I got 18 repetitions when in previous years, I could only do 15. And then the next week I did it for 20. So I hit my goal that I've been trying for 5 years within, a few months of being on the diet. So I clearly saw an increase in strength. During that time, I was also playing with this thing called the Concept 2 rowing machine, where I set several American records on. When I was 49, I actually broke world records or American records for the 40 to 49-year-old class. When I turned 50, I improved upon my 49-year-old marks by going on a carnivore diet by about somewhere in the order of about 10% quicker times, which is, considering I already had an American record, that was quite a significant jump in power output. So I just saw just an overall tremendous improvement in my work capacity, my recovery, my strength, my power output.
Now, I've been lifting weights since I was 16. And for those people in the audience who don't understand or who haven't done it, that is a huge increase for several reasons. One, you were older. And two, you were lifting very, very heavy weights. So to go from 15 reps to 18 reps is significant. Um, uh, so how about your cardio abilities and mental health? Did the carnivore diet affect your attitude, your perspective, your cardio strengths at all?
Yeah, with cardio, I can do cardio for hours and hours on end if I choose to do it. That's not my preferred method of exercise, but I look at rowing, competitive rowing, and what I've been able to do with that. And again, I'm still breaking world records and at world record pace and what is it's a cardiovascular sport. It's not a long distance endurance sport, but it's certainly a cardiovascular, a very high level of glycolytic sport that I do very well in that. As far as mental health is concerned, mood, I'm generally happy. I'm a pretty happy guy. I certainly, respond to environmental stresses, ups and downs, but I'm generally, my baseline sort of level is calm and happy. And I think that's kind of maybe a normal human resting baseline. I don't have wild mood swings. I'm not down at all. Pretty rarely do I ever get sad about anything. So I'm generally pretty upbeat about that. And the diet has made an impact on that.
Now, you also mentioned that your coronary calcium scan was at 0. Do you have any idea what it was before you went on this diet?
I don't. That's the first time I'd ever checked that. And so for those who don't know, a coronary artery calcium scan assesses the calcification that occur in the blood vessels that surround and feed the heart. And when a lot of calcium builds up, that indicates a lot of plaque has been there. And so first it becomes soft plaque and then it calcifies. And so 0 is the best score you can get. You don't want any, ideally. And as you get older and older, you're more likely to have this. So I had that done, I think, when I was 52, after several years on the diet and previously being on a high-fat ketogenic diet prior to that. And so what it was before, I don't know. I'm going to reassess it in a couple of years to see if it's changed anyway. Hopefully it'll continue to remain 0. I have seen a few people now that have done this diet and have seen a regression of their coronary artery calcium, which is kind of interesting. That still, needs to be studied more rigorously, but I've seen that happening.
Now, what is the coronary calcium scan number for the average person your age who isn't on the carnivore diet?
So I think for people over 50, about 25% of the people have a 0 score. Beyond that, it's somewhere in between. Anything above 400 would be considered severely, puts you at severe risk. And then those numbers 0 to 10, 10 to 100 are kind of moderate or intermediate. I think most people fall kind of in that moderate to low risk category. So it's not, I think another decade, things start to separate out. Though, again, the older you get, the more likely you are to have heart disease.
So if you're at zero, does that suggest that you are highly unlikely to have a heart attack? And conversely, if someone has a score, say, at 400 or above, does that mean they're highly likely to have a heart attack?
Basically, yeah. Zero basically means you have as low as possible risk of having a heart attack of any other person. And if you there's some cardiovascular risk predictors. There's something called the MESA calculator, which stands for the multi-ethnicity study on atherosclerosis. And you plug those numbers in, and my risk for having a heart attack in the next 10 years is something like 2%. So it's pretty low, whereas the average risk might be 5 to 7%, something along those lines, given my age. So I'm at pretty low risk, as low as you can get, basically.
So I've been working out since I was 17. But given that I've consumed several million bags of potato chips between then and now, I'm assuming my number is not at zero. So, but I'll have to look into this. You also say that the carnivore diet can normalize the gut biome and normalize your glucose levels and insulin levels. What have you seen this diet do for people who are type 2 diabetics?
I've seen just that. In fact, I've seen literally hundreds, if not thousands, of diabetics, including type 1 diabetics, by the way, that dramatically come off essentially almost always come off all their medications. They end up with normal blood glucoses, super stable blood glucose. And in fact, Harvard University has just done a study on folks doing the carnivore diet. It's yet to be published, but I've seen the data. And in that data, they show just what I'm talking about, pretty much 100% remission of diabetes with people going on this diet. So it's pretty powerful stuff when it comes to diabetes.
So what kind of A1C number does the average junk food eating individual have? And what kind do you have now? What is if you know what your A1C number is?
I can tell you my fasting blood glucose this morning was 61. This week, the average has been about 64. So, if I were to extrapolate that out to an A1C, you'd be looking at something around 4.1, 4.2. Anything above 5.7 is considered pre-diabetic. 6.4 is considered diabetic. I'd say the average person is sitting somewhere in the high fives, mid to high fives, probably. That's pretty typical. Even and prior to that, we start seeing insulin problems. So we might see a fasting elevated insulin level, which most physicians won't know to check and don't check. And that predates actual diabetes and blood glucose problems probably by 10 years. So the disease is present. The symptoms aren't showing up yet. So usually you see the insulin levels go up. My insulin last time I checked was at the very lowest level of normal, so extremely low as well. So that's been a result for me.
So you also say that there is no evidence that we need plants in our diet. Do you believe that vegetables are completely unnecessary? For example, some foods like garlic, onion, and mushroom are reported to have very strong anti-carcinogenic properties. Do you see no benefits at all to eating vegetables?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would certainly say they're not necessary. You can certainly survive and thrive and probably maintain optimal health without them. I think they're conditionally beneficial. I think the problem is what they're tested on are people eating a standard American diet, a junk food diet. They can mitigate some of the problems that you have. I would say just if you avoid those problems in the first place, you don't need these anti-inflammatory foods. It's like going to the doctor with a headache and it's caused by you hitting your head against the wall. Well, if you just stop hitting your head against the wall, you would need to go to the doctor to get your pain medicine for the headache. And so, that's the way I look at these foods. Now, if we look at like many of these plant foods, there's a lot of talk about things like polyphenols and sulforaphane and things like that come in cruciferous vegetables. Hey, why do they help you? Well, what they do is they upregulate our endogenous detoxification pathways. And that's basically, it's a low-level toxin that upregulates our detoxification pathways, which makes us more hardy or resistant to other insults or other sort of things that would cause us problems. And so you can get that without eating vegetables. You can get that through exercise. You can get that through fasting. You can get that through sauna. You can get it through cold immersion. All these other ways to do this. So it's not the only way to do this. These beneficial side effects of eating vegetables can be attained many, many different ways.
Now, you also say that it appears that the people who consume the most fiber tend to have the most diverticulitis or colon polyps. Does that suggest to you that the body is trying to reject or resist all the fiber that the vegetables present?
Well, to be, I guess, more sort of specific on it, there was a study by Dr. Ann Peary looking at fiber consumption, 2,000 people having colonoscopies. And what she found was those in the highest quartile for fiber consumption had the highest amount of diverticulosis, which is the little pouches that pop out of the colon, which will later become inflamed and infected. So there is that relationship. Fiber is indigestible. Humans cannot digest it. We depend on bacteria in our gut to do some of that digestion. They will, release things that are problematic. We have methane and other gases and things that make us bloated and uncomfortable. They will produce short chain fatty acids, which tend to have a beneficial effect on the gut health, particularly butyrate. However, you can get butyrate or the effects of butyrate several different ways. You can eat it directly in things like butter, which have butyrate, butyric acid in that. Protein itself can also elicit short chain fatty acids, things like propionate, methylbutyrate. We also know that if you're on a low carbohydrate diet, you'll produce things called ketone bodies, the most common one being called beta hydroxybutyrate, which is just one OH or hydroxyl molecule away from becoming butyrate. And that's rapidly converted between butyrate and beta hydroxybutyrate. So you get the same effects basically with the, whether you eat it from fiber or whether you eat it directly or you're on a low carbohydrate diet.
Now, I eat a fruit and vegetable smoothie each morning, and that's blended. It's completely liquefied. Are you saying that my body will not be able to process that regardless of the liquefaction?
Well, your body will certainly be able to absorb some of that. You'll be able to absorb the sugars from that, the simple sugars. You can absorb that. You might absorb some of the nutrients in there, but any of the fiber-based part, it's just going to end up in the toilet. So all the money you spend on organic fruits and vegetables, most of it ends up in the toilet. You can't use it. You can't access it. Even if you blend it down with a blender, you still can't absorb it. It's not small enough. We have to break it up into basically molecules, and a blender won't do that. What it will do is change the absorption characteristics. So you'll get a sugar rush a lot quicker than you would had you eaten a whole banana or a whole apple, where you at least have some of the fiber that will slow down some of that glucose uptake. So you might get a glucose monitor and prick your finger 30 minutes after taking that fruit smoothie and see what it does. And then compare that from eating the same amount of fruit or vegetables or whatever you put in there, and check your finger at 30 minutes later, and you'll probably see a little bit of a difference, or a significant difference likely.
Without naming any brand names, what do you think of the synthetic meats being introduced into the marketplace? Have you ever tried them? What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of synthetic meats. There's meats that are derived, or I'm going to use meat in quotation marks, faux meats, these sort of meat-like analogs, which are made out of typically a seed oil, canola oil or soybean oil, and then some sort of, protein source, often soybeans or pea proteins. I think they're complete junk food. It's complete processed food. It's completely garbage. It's not going to do anything to help anyone's health. I don't believe they help the environment in the ways that they're being portrayed to do so. They are derived from huge monocrop, agricultural, sort of products where they completely wipe out the ecosystem around them. It's just this row cropping, which is so destructive to the environment. One of those companies I know is outsourcing their product from China. So they're using all these sort of unethical ways to farm these beans and soybeans, and then they're selling it to us as a quote unquote healthy alternative or environmentally friendly alternative, which is completely farcical. I think that's just an absolute, it's all marketing, and people certainly are kind of sort of bought into that, but it's not what's going on.
How would you compare the nutritional value to, a fake burger to a real burger or a real piece of meat?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, if you read the nutrition label, there'll be some similarities. There'll be similar amounts of protein. There might be similar amounts of fat and sodium and these types of things. That is a very, very small glimpse of the actual picture. We know that beef, for instance, contains something like 55,000 unique compounds. There was a nice study done out of Duke University just last year in 2020. Stefan Van Vliet and I think Fred Provenza did this study, and they compared the nutrient profile of one of these plant-based burgers directly compared to a hamburger. And of the 55,000 compounds found in beef, only about 10% of them were contained in the plant food. So you're missing out 90% of the potential nutritional products that are in there. So it's much more complicated than people are led to believe. And that's why making this synthetic meat, whether it's, derived from smushed up plant products, which by the way are just, in often cases, agricultural waste products that they're able to, refine and sell at a high markup, or even the cultured meat, which is going to be grown from cells. There's going to be some significant issues with that as well.
Do any of the synthetic meats have any actual protein, or is it a protein analog or some kind of chemical attempt at protein? What is it they're doing?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's protein, just like there's pea proteins, things like you see the powders that you see in the grocery store, the plant-based powders, whether it's soybean or, peas or potatoes or some sort of protein product. Now, the problem with that is those proteins often tend to be incomplete by themselves. They tend to contain things called anti-nutrients, for instance, soybeans, which are probably one of the better sources of protein when it comes to amino acid bioavailability, or amino acid composition rather. But soybeans can come with something called trypsin inhibitors. And so we have a hard time breaking down those proteins to access them. So they're harder to access. So there is actual protein within there. It's just in a form our body has a more challenging time to sort of extract.
How many ounces of meat do you consume daily? What would you guess?
So I don't have to guess. I mean, I know exactly what I had. So today I had it right at 4 pounds of meat. So what is that? That's 64 ounces, well above the average American who consumes about 2.5 ounces a day.
And are you completely satiated, or are you still hungry?
No, I'm pretty hungry. I mean, I'm not hungry. I literally just got done eating, a big steak like 10 minutes ago, and I'm completely fine, completely satiated. In fact, I won't eat again until tomorrow morning. So I'll probably be about 18 hours, 18 hours before my next meal. And that does me just fine.
So as I said earlier, I've been lifting since I was 16, 17 years old. And I went on a low carb diet about a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
and also started practicing intermittent fasting at the same time ever since then. And my recovery time from workouts has improved dramatically. I also need much less sleep, maybe 50% as much sleep as I used to do. And I feel much better in general. What have you noticed about your workouts now that you practice the carnivore diet?
Yeah, I mean, I can train extremely intensely at an extremely high level, pretty much 7 days a week. I don't have to take a day off. In fact, I had 2 days ago, I had a professional mixed martial artist come over to my house. He's 20 some years younger than me. And, basically I put him through his paces and, he was wiped out at the end of it, and I was still going fine. Now he's on a carnivore diet as well, but I mean, I can train at an extremely high level. I recover extremely well. I'm rarely, if ever, sore. I'm putting up numbers the same numbers I was putting up 20, 30 years ago, quite honestly. Sleep, just like you said, sleep sound, I recover well. I need a little bit less sleep. I think I think that has to do with the oxidative stress that I don't incur while not eating carbohydrates. So I think those things all, tend to add up and add up in a beneficial way.
Do you believe that the carnivore diet is good for young and growing children, or is this something better suited for young adults?
Well, I don't think young and growing children necessarily need to do it. I think they certainly can. I mean, I think the one issue with kids is their job is to grow, so they need pretty much a high caloric intake. And so one of the issues, if we look at breast milk, for instance, breast milk is very, very calorie dense. It's fat. It does have carbohydrates there in the form of lactose, and so I think the young children, they need to be able to get a source of high amounts of nutrition and energy. And so one of the problems some people have with a carnivore diet is they become so satiated they don't eat enough. And so they end up losing weight, which is a good thing for most people. But some people, they can't hang on to the weight, and they end up, just having poor energy because they're just not eating enough. So that could be an issue. I tend to use a carnivore diet as an elimination diet to help people figure out health issues, to help them, hopefully, kind of reset things. Because a lot of people have, for a lack of a better word, broken metabolisms or broken gut function. This seems to be a good way to fix it. I know of quite a few kids that have been doing it very well. I mean, usually we see kids in their teens typically that adopt this, and they tend to do very well with that. But I mean, little growing kids, I think the best thing with the little kids is not to put them on all the processed junk. I mean, there's so much processed junk, baby food. That includes formula. Unfortunately, for women that can't breastfeed, there's not a lot of good options because the formula is typically soybean oil and corn syrup and, a lot of chemicals and junk. And then they go straight into these rice cereals and these highly processed fake fruit products and so on and so forth. So I think if meat should be a central part of a child's diet. Our animal products, whether it's meat, eggs, dairy, so on and so forth, that should make up the bulk of their food. That should be part of every meal. And then if they want some more calories and are still hungry, a piece of fruit or something like that. Like my kids, they get lots and lots of meat, animal products, and then if they're still hungry, they might have a piece of fruit or two. They rarely ever ask for vegetables, and I don't force it on them. So I'm not I think the kids are pretty happy about that.
By the way, you mentioned eggs. Do you eat the entire egg or just the egg whites?
I eat both. I mean, I know there are people that don't do as well with the egg whites for various reasons. I went through a period of time where I didn't tolerate eggs very well after being on the diet, and then that kind of went away and got better. And I mean, I've eaten as many as 2 dozen eggs in one day. I mean, that's a lot, but I mean, like I said, I'm a big guy. But I was up until this month eating 8 to 10 to 12 to 16 a day without problem. They're a good source of protein. They're a good source of nutrition. They're like a multivitamin.
That's 16 eggs. That's
sure.
Now, is that in addition to the steaks or what?
Well, if I'm eating 16 eggs, I might, instead of eating 4 pounds of steak, I might be eating 3 pounds of steak or 2.5 pounds of steak. So it's, generally my food is, I'll consider 12 eggs the equivalent of about a pound of meat. So somewhere I'm eating about 4 pounds of food typically a day. And if I'm trying to gain weight, that might be 5 or 6 pounds.
Scrambled or hard boiled?
Typically scrambled. I don't think I would want to eat 18 hard boiled eggs. It's too dry.
Yeah. Do you think just eating the egg whites adds a lot of nutrition? Do you think just eating the egg whites is healthy and a value add, or do you really need the yolks for this to work?
Well, I don't know what you mean by this, but I mean, egg yolks do add something to it for sure. There's a whole bunch of nutrients. In fact, there is a recent study comparing eating egg whites versus whole eggs with regard to muscle protein synthesis. And they saw the group that ate the actual whole egg did much better with regard to muscle protein synthesis. So there's something in the egg yolk that is additionally stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Now, egg whites are a good source of protein for sure. They're a bioavailable, highly complete protein. So you can use that as a protein supplement, but I think the best value is a whole egg.
By that I meant that most of the nutritional value is in the combination of the two.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
But didn't they used to say that eating the yolk, too much of the yolk, would cause your cholesterol to skyrocket over time? I mean, obviously that's not the case in your situation, but isn't that what they used to say?
They did used to say that. They used to say a lot of things. Remember, we used to tell people smoking was healthy. So there's a lot of things they said that turned out to be false. Cholesterol has not been shown. Dietary cholesterol has not really been shown to raise serum cholesterol. It's certainly not associated with heart disease. In fact, even the U.S. dietary guidelines in 2015 said cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern, meaning you can eat that basically ad lib. Don't worry about it. It's not going to cause heart disease. There was a case report on a guy a few years ago. He was eating 25 eggs a day every day, and they checked his cholesterol and it was completely normal. So I think it depends on the person, quite honestly.
What does the carnivore diet do for the immune system? And do you think it's capable of helping people avoid COVID or deal with it once they contract it?
Well, I would argue, and we don't have, studies looking at any particular diet. I mean, there's a few studies out there, I think, starting to look at ketogenic diets in COVID. But again, this is a new topic. There's not been, studies on this to my knowledge. I will tell you that a good, person with good nutrition and a good healthy metabolic profile is going to have a better immune system. So in general terms, yes, if you can improve your blood glucose control, if you can lose your visceral fat, if you can lose your overall body fat, if you can decrease inflammation, you're going to have a better capability to deal with any infection, whether it's coronavirus or something else. And so certainly I would say that's probably wise to, even if you're not on a carnivore diet, just improve your diet. And it's very frustrating as a physician watching our message being, masking and vaccines, and almost no effort is made, no national level effort is made to say, hey folks, it's time to lean up. Let's get out there. Let's do some regular exercise. Let's cut out the junk food. That message has not gone out at all. And that would probably make as big or a bigger difference in the survivability of this for the people that are most at risk. And it's very, very frustrating to see that.
Do you think the carnivore diet is healthier and more beneficial than the keto diet?
I do. And, and again, I'll put the caveat depending on what's sustainable for you. For some people, it's not sustainable. I mean, the idea of just eating animal-based products may seem like something you can never do. Surprising, a lot of people do it and they find it's quite easy because it's kind of one of those things where if you eliminate the sort of trigger foods and the sort of addiction, related foods and don't think about them and don't have them in your life, then it's easier to kind of distance them. The keto diet tends to a lot of people creep back into some of these problematic foods because they're always kind of sort of walking that line. I have seen, many, many people go from the ketogenic diet to this diet. In fact, that's probably one of the most common entry points. And with rare exception, they always seem to see improvements, health improvements above and beyond what they got on a ketogenic diet. Usually it's like, well, I was on a ketogenic diet, but I couldn't lose all the weight, or my knee continued to hurt, or my autoimmune issue was still flaring up. And that usually goes away on a carnivore diet. Now, again, the caveat there being the ketogenic diet can be a lot of things. It can be people that are eating, keto junk food all day long, calling it a ketogenic diet. Just because the ketogenic macronutrient ratios are, fat-based and low carbohydrate doesn't mean it's health food. You could sit there and drink Diet Coke and swill, corn oil all day and call it a ketogenic diet. That's not necessarily healthy.
A lot of people try the carnivore diet, but it's just too much of a departure from what they're accustomed to. What about going on the carnivore diet on an alternating day basis, every other day, just nothing but meat? Are there still health benefits to doing that, or are you sort of polluting the water, nutritionally speaking?
No, I think, again, I think there's a couple of things. I think meat is incredibly nutritional. It's just a good source of nutrition. So if you're eating meat in your diet, generally it's good. So I think that's beneficial. I think eliminating junk food is very beneficial. I mean, this is where most of these diets work. If you go on a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet or a zone diet or a Mediterranean diet, if you cut out all the processed junk food, you're generally going to get better. Now, it depends on what you're doing on those alternate days. Carnivore diet plus, on day one and then cookies and ice cream on day two, probably not the best approach. But if you wanted to do something reasonably whole food based on those other days, it's probably better than when you weren't before. And that's kind of what I did, quite honestly. I mean, when I started this diet, I did a carnivore day or a carnivore meal. It was steak and eggs. I said, I survived. I didn't have to have a piece of potato or toast or some kind of vegetable on my plate, and I did fine. And then what happened is it was able to allow me to do a day and then 2 days and then 3 days and then a week and then 2 weeks and then a month. So you can sort of progress there, and you can kind of make notice, how do I feel on the days where I'm just doing a carnivore day? And many people notice they feel really good on those days. And then when they add the other foods back in, they may not feel as good. So you kind of naturally notice what's going on. But I think there are, because there's a lot of talk around, meat is bad for you. It causes colorectal cancer, it causes heart disease. I think that data is, largely derived from epidemiologic data, which is not very, very helpful. It's kind of a waste, quite honestly.
So you're saying that's not true?
Well, I'm saying that we don't know that. We don't have evidence that would support that. We don't have strong evidence. And I'm not alone saying that. There's a nice study that came out in October of 2019 by the Nutrirex organization. They were 14 researchers from around the world. This is the largest study that's ever been done on red meat. And one of the lead authors of that study was a guy named Gordon Guyatt. Gordon Guyatt is a professor emeritus out of I'm blanking on the university in Canada. But anyway, he was the one who actually came up with the term evidence-based medicine. He actually invented the term evidence-based medicine in a single author paper he wrote back in 1991. Anyway, their conclusion of that study was there's no strong evidence, only weak evidence that shows that meat either causes cancer, heart disease, or really any other disease. So it's really, a bunch of this sort of meaningless epidemiology that points to that. And what I'm seeing with people that just eat meat, like myself and the tens of thousands of other people that have done this, they routinely get healthy. I mean, they literally come off medications. All of their health issues, with very rare exception, tend to get much better.
So Joe Rogan lasted for about a month on the carnivore diet, but then went back to eating a wider spectrum of foods. That's what happened to me as well. Um, what do you think it takes to stick to a diet like this? Or is it just too harsh and restrictive for most people?
Well, again, it depends on what your motivation is. If your motivation is, I feel suicidal every day, I'm not on the diet, or I'm in horrible, tremendous pain every day, I'm not on the diet, that makes it easier to stick to the diet. Now, if you're, I feel a little bit better and you decide that, hey, I want to have a bigger diversity in my diet, that's fine too. Now, Joe is on the diet right now again. I know he went on again this year. He did it in, January of last year, had an excellent result, lost a bunch of weight, got lean, said he felt fantastic, best he's ever felt. Went back to sort of a more mixed diet. In August, he resumed the carnivore diet. He sent me a message, said he did that again. And then again, this January, he jumped back on it again and has been doing that. So he's been, back and forth, back and forth. And that's what many people do. They find out that they feel good. They feel perhaps the best they've felt in years, and they go back to that. But I mean, part of it is having a support system around you. That's some of the things that I'm building with this, MeetRx community and platform. We've got thousands of people that are doing this to support each other. So that's a helpful thing. Having resources, just having support around you is just tremendously important. I think finding, and again, I don't preach or recommend that people have to stay 100% strict. I think you have to find out what works for you. Again, I think if you put animal-based nutrition at the center of the plate, front and center. It's not a condiment like some people are talking about, making meat a condiment. No, meat is a meal. The rest of the stuff is the flavor, the condiments. If you want to put some mushrooms and garlic and some hot sauce on there to provide some more flavor, that's fine. But I think, doing it the other way around, where meat is just a minuscule part of the meal, is going to lead to a lot of problems, quite honestly.
Is there any data or study out there that suggests that the carnivore diet can help people with cancer or arthritis or any of the other severe illnesses?
So there are some case reports in that regard, particularly with cancer. There's one that was looked at brain cancer, a person that had, I want to say it was glioblastoma, and has been in remission for something like 5 years without progression, doing a carnivore style diet called the Paleolithic ketogenic diet, which is basically a carnivore diet. There is The study's going to come out, it's going to be published later this year from Harvard University, is going to show arthritis and some of the diabetes and some of these other things being improved. There was just a study released or just about to be published from Sweden, looking at SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in carnivore diet, and 6 out of 6 people that went on the diet 100%, resolve that condition. So these studies are coming. Like I said, this is a new thing. I've been pushing for it. We are funding a large study, probably $1 million study that we're going to do also to sort of demonstrate some of this stuff as well.
So I love apples and fruit. What do you think of these foods in general? Do you think they're healthy, or do they contain too much sugar to be healthy?
Well, I just think it depends on who you are. Some people can certainly absorb more fruit than others, or more sugar than others. I don't necessarily believe that glucose per se is a toxin to us. Or, we wouldn't make it if it was a toxin. Our body makes it. It could be in excessive amounts. It could be in people that don't have a good ability to clear it. So if you are lean, athletic, active, you probably can eat, more fruit than a sort of a sedentary diabetic could. There are some people that even fruit causes issues with, and like I said, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different compounds in an apple. Which one? Apple seeds, for instance, are full of cyanide. If you chew up enough apple seeds, you can poison yourself. The skin has more of it than the actual, I guess, the pulp of the apple. Obviously, that the modern fruits have been, aggressively hybridized to bear huge amounts of sugar. It's not something that we would have probably ancestrally would have had a lot of. And so I think it's easy to overdo. But I think, small amounts are probably fine for most people. It's just a matter of just not eating too much of anything. And that goes for meat too. I think it's hard to overeat meat. It is extremely difficult to get fat eating just meat. It can be done though.
How do you feel about supplements like D3, fish oil, and multivitamins? Do you take them, and do you recommend them to others, or not at all?
I don't take them personally. I think the only supplement to my diet would be salt, if you want to call that a supplement. I like it. It helps the taste of the food. But I think that, again, it depends on the situation. I know many of the vitamin D supplements and fish oil supplements have not shown to be very effective. And some people will say it's because of the quality of the supplement or the dose. And I think we're still trying to figure that out. I think vitamin D status is as much a reflection of metabolic health as it is nutritional sufficiency. That is to say that even if you're eating enough vitamin D in your diet or even taking supplements, if your metabolic health is poor, you may still end up with a low vitamin D level. We saw that in a recent study with looking at a Finnish study in children on vegan diets, that even despite eating what would be considered an adequate amount of vitamin D or taking it in supplement form, they still express vitamin D deficiencies because their overall metabolic milieu had been changed by an insufficient diet to cause them to express, deficiency status.
Now, you've had tremendous success with this diet and this lifestyle. Do you think, statistically speaking, you're a bit of an outlier, or do most of the patients and people you encounter achieve similar and comparable results on this diet?
Well, I mean, again, I'm an outlier in the fact that I'm a world champion athlete and I'm kind of psychotically possessed at being competitive and exercising. So I don't want to use that. But I mean, as far as my general health markers, I'd say I'm fairly typical. I mean, what I see is low triglycerides, elevations in LDL or HDL. I see blood pressure normalizing. I see glucose normalizing in most people that did inflammatory markers normalizing in most people that have done this, that I've seen. I've had the opportunity to look at hundreds and hundreds of people's labs, and that's been pretty consistent.
Would you mind telling me your blood pressure?
Well, last I checked, I think it was like 115 over 70. So, I mean, that's a completely normal blood pressure. So I don't know what it is today, obviously, but that was about, a month ago or so.
Have you had any morbidly obese patients who came to you as a last resort and said, please help me with a carnivore diet to get rid of this weight?
Absolutely. Many, many, many. We've had a lot of 100-pound, 200-pound weight loss stories. Happens all the time. We've got a lot of people, and it seems to be very effective for the morbidly obese.
So what's the typical time frame for losing 100 pounds for somebody who's never had any other success trying other diets?
It seems to be 6 months to a year. Typically, that seems to be the general course for people with that much weight to lose.
Now, I'm assuming you have friends who are also weightlifters and who've tried the carnivore diet. Have they achieved similar improvements in athletic performance to what you've achieved?
I've seen many athletes have achieved excellent performance. In fact, we've got one playing in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. Danny Sorensen, starting strong safety for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's been on the diet for a year now, and he's had the best season of his career, on a carnivore diet. So I've seen a lot of high-level professional athletes. There are people that I know personally that have done it, that have also succeeded, getting stronger, getting leaner, better recovery, better sleep, all those things.
Now, the entire 1 meal a day eating movement has generated a lot of interest and a lot of followers. How would you compare the health benefits and effectiveness of, say, a normal 16/8 intermittent fasting diet to a 1 meal a day diet? Are you familiar enough with the OMAD?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I've done 1 meal a day myself. I don't know that it's extraordinarily any better than any other eating pattern, quite honestly. I think what you eat is important. I think in general, not snacking continuously is a tremendous benefit. And I think for two reasons. One, I think it's the quality of the food we tend to snack on, which is generally just junk food, but also the fact that we're eating far more calories when we're eating all the time. I think those things are very important. And then the fact that, is there a benefit from allowing our digestive system some sort of period of rest? A lot of people like to talk about the concept of autophagy, where the cellular mechanisms are kind of turning over and kind of cleaning house. There's some benefit with that. What else can drive autophagy? Exercise can drive it. So I think there's, all these things kind of go together. So I don't know that OMAD, 1 meal a day, or prolonged fasting has any more benefit than anything else. But like everything, some things work for some people, some things work for other people. One of the problems I see with OMAD is a lot of people have a difficult time eating enough in that one meal to sustain them for a full 24 hours. And so some people may end up lethargic or, just suffering from, just under eating.
What about just a compressed eating window? maybe instead of one meal over an hour, maybe eating over a 2 or 3 hour time window. It's not going to be genuinely, OMAD, but it's moving in the right direction. Do you think there are benefits to doing that?
Yeah, I mean, again, the same thing. I think if it allows you to get enough food and satisfy your nutritional needs, and that's completely fine. I think it's easier probably to do that than OMAD. So, for instance, today I had both of my meals probably within 5 hours of each other. So I'll have something like 19 hours before my next meal, and that works fine for me. What I've found is also the timing of the meals with regard to the circadian pattern. I tend to like to eat early in the day and be done. Not eating. I sleep better if I don't eat in the late evening. My blood glucose when I wake up in the morning is much lower. Whether that's a true benefit or not, that's debatable, but that's a pattern that I notice. If I finish my meals early, then my blood glucose is relatively low when I wake up.
If you don't mind my asking, when was the last time you had a cold or the flu?
Um, it's been several years. I can't remember. I mean, I will say that since going on a low carb diet, I have had a cold, one or two in the last 10 years, perhaps. But it was very short lived. I mean, it was like 1 or 2 days of, the sniffles, and it wasn't anything. Like in years past, almost like clockwork, whenever the weather would turn to say November, and then maybe once or twice during that winter season, I would get a cold that would hang around for a week or two. I don't get that anymore.
But still, that's not nearly as often as most people. So, that's also a great indicator. Do you plan on getting the COVID vaccine?
I don't have any plans right now. I'm not really in a high risk group. I'd like to see sort of the efficacy a little bit longer play out. I think they're still kind of figuring out how many they're going to do, what's the schedule going to be, who's it going to be beneficial for. Like I said, I think I'm not worried about succumbing to a viral illness at this point. I mean, I'm extremely healthy. I'm very active. I'm metabolically healthy. Again, if I were someone that were in a high risk group, I would be more inclined to do so. I'm not against vaccines at all. I've had most of my I've had vaccines for years. I had all my childhood vaccines. I used to get the flu vaccine all the time as a physician. I wore a mask every day of my life as a surgeon. So I'm not opposed to these things, but I think that some of these things are kind of overdone, and we're kind of maybe jumping the gun a little bit before we have enough data.
Now, you're a human physician and not a veterinarian, so you probably won't be able to answer this question. But it seems that a lot of carbohydrate-based dog foods being sold are causing terrible damage to the dogs. Do you think that a carnivore diet would benefit dogs and other pets?
Well, I'll just put it this way. Both of my dogs are on a carnivore diet, and they love it, and they're healthy. And my 9-year-old golden retriever runs around like a puppy. In fact, there's an interesting fellow by the name of Thomas Seyfried who's done some work on cancer, looking at cancer as a metabolic disease. And he's up in, I want to say he's at Boston's Children's Hospitals or Boston University, perhaps. I can't remember exactly. But they have data on dogs with actual cancers, with actual tumors that they have seen reversed by switching them over to a meat-based diet, a low-carb diet. We know that now these sort of grain-free diet dog foods they replace the grains with pea proteins, and they're seeing all these problems with dilated cardiomyopathy. So these dogs are dying from that. And certainly the grain that we see with
I think you heard us.
Yeah, my dogs want to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
The grain in the dog foods and the cat foods are making these cats huge and diabetic and fat like their owners. So we're seeing that over and over.
You mentioned cancer. Have you ever heard of people, end stage cancer patients, who've halted and reversed the cancer by doing extreme fasts, medically supervised extreme fasts? Is that legit, or is that just a myth?
I think it's happened a few times. I don't know that there's enough consistency to hang my hat on and say this is a definite treatment. Again, that group in Hungary called the Paleomedicina group, they treat those people. They treat these end stage people, and they are having decent results with regard to remission if the patients are willing to stay on protocol, which is hard because they have it's not only a carnivore diet, but it's a pretty calorically restricted one as well. And so they're low calorie, only meat, fat, some organ meats, and they are seeing the reversal and halting of cancers and some of these things, and at least in some cases. Is it enough to say everybody should do that? Certainly not. It needs more study, but I think that's happened, at least anecdotally. And again, that's for what it's worth.
Have you ever had any patients who've had one or two heart attacks, had some stents put in, and then tried the carnivore diet? And if so, what effects or benefits did they derive?
So there are a few people in the community that have had heart disease, including stenting, that have done this diet. Some of them have seen improvement in cardiac function with things like ejection fraction, which is how much the heart can pump out with each squeeze. Normally it's supposed to pump out about 70% of the blood in the left ventricle, which is the big ventricle that squeezes the blood to the body. I've seen people go from 20 to 30% ejection fraction back up to 50, 60%, kind of normalizing. I've seen people where they've had stenosis of their vessels, and it's improved. Again, these are isolated incidents. We need to do a real study on this at some point, but we are seeing some people that have had carotid artery where they've seen plaque building up in their carotid arteries, and that's improved. So that's been happening with people on a carnivore diet.
Do you think it's improved enough to prevent a subsequent heart attack?
That's a good question. I don't know for sure. I think that's something that, maybe with time we'll see. Again, this study from Harvard will look at, we talked about coronary artery calcification. They had, I think, 3 patients within that study which all showed regression, so improvements in their calcification scores. So that'll be published here in the near future. Again, three patients is not enough to, change, medical guidelines, but it's a start. I think that this is an interesting topic because if somebody just had a heart attack, then they are very likely to have the conditions to make them have another heart attack. The best predictor of a future heart attack is a previous heart attack. And so because you already got everything it takes. And so that's chronic inflammation, probably high blood pressure, probably hyperglycemia, probably, chronic vascular damage. And then high cholesterol in that situation may be an issue. So you want to be able to fix all of those things simultaneously. And, so that may be a time when, if you are going to go on a carnivore diet right after a heart attack, you may have to deal with cholesterol issues at the same time.
Now, when I work out for about 2 hours, and 45 minutes is cardio and the rest is all weights. And, I'm hearing from various experts, some say long workouts are detrimental. Some say they're fine. It's entirely up to your physique and your stamina. How long do you work out for? How long are your workouts? And what do you recommend medically? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, see, that's a really good question. So I think that I want to break this up into 2 kind of categories. I think that strength training is extremely important, particularly as we age. It's important to maintain muscle mass, not only for function, but also for bone health, for metabolic health. It's a huge disposal for our fuels. And so we want to be able to maintain that. So having solid muscle mass is extremely important. So I would put most of my emphasis there. I think activity throughout the day is important. So I think avoiding sedentary behavior. So like you see, I'm standing right now. I spend probably, my job doesn't require me to do anything active. It's mostly, computer work and that sort of stuff. So, but I make a point to spend 3 or 4 hours a day just being upright, walking, doing things, working while I'm walking. I think that's an important part of it. You don't maybe need to spend 2 hours jogging a week or 2 hours a day jogging, but if you're just moving around being active, and then put in the strength training, and to that, if you can afford it, I would add in some sort of sprinting type behavior, some kind of high intensity interval type training. To me, that's the most bang for your buck. So I think avoiding being sedentary, short, you don't need to spend a long time. I'll probably spend on average half an hour in what I consider exercise, strength training, heavy weightlifting, some sprinting.
Wait. You spend half an hour, that's it, on lifting weights?
Yeah, typically. Some days a little more, but generally but again, remember, I train pretty much every day, 7 days a week.
So you don't think you need 48 hours to recover before you lift again? That's not true?
Well, it depends on what muscle group we're talking about, how hard I trained it. I did push-ups. I did 300 push-ups a day for 100 straight days, and I didn't have any recovery between one day to the next doing push-ups. Now, push-ups may be more easy than doing heavy deadlifts. I wouldn't want to do heavy deadlifts every day for 100 days. So it depends. And I don't work the same muscle groups day after day. I'm changing it up. So one day I'll be leg-based workout. The next day might be an upper body workout, different types of sprinting. So yeah, I don't find that, I find that I recover extremely well.
I'll tell you something interesting. So I read that if you have if you consume too much sugar, that it prevents you from adding a lot of muscle from your workouts. So about a year ago, I started the low carb diet. I started the intermittent fasting diet, and I cut back on my sugar consumption. And I have added more muscle in the last year than I have in the last 10 years of my previous diet. Uh, does that mirror your understanding of things, or what's going on there?
Well, I mean, there's probably a number of things going on there. You know, metabolic health. I mean, when first of all, when you say too much, you automatically put it into the bad category. So we've already sort of, it's kind of a tautological argument where you say too much of something. So how do you define too much? So if you are consuming too much of something, it's going to have negative implications on your health. You know, your metabolic health may be compromised. You may have insulin resistance. All of those things will impede muscle growth. And so, for certainly, if you're eating too much of anything, it's not going to be particularly helpful for muscle growth. Now, somebody might argue that's a different category, but certainly too much sugar, too much fat will lead to insulin resistance. And when we're insulin resistant, we tend to be androgen resistant, and we can't put on the muscle like we could if we aren't dealing with those things.
Hmm. Well, I've really enjoyed this interview. Before we wrap things up, is there anything that you would like to promote?
Um, I'd like to promote people to take care of their health, and hopefully we can, sort of face the fact that we're facing a pandemic of obesity and metabolic, uh, you know, health problems, and so hopefully we can do that. I'm trying to do my part through what I do, and hopefully that message will get to enough people. That's really, the main message I'd like to promote.
You want to tell people what your social media is?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, on Instagram, well, I mean, the easiest way to get a hold of me and actually have a conversation is through meetrx.com. I have a meeting every day, 7 days a week, and you're welcome to pop in there and ask me questions directly. Social media wise, Instagram, Shawn, SHAWN, Baker, BAKER, 1967. I'm also on Twitter at SBakerMD. I've got a YouTube channel, just Shawn Baker. And those are probably the major places where most people would see what I'm up to.
Well, listen, it has been a pleasure having you on the John Ark Show. This has been really informative. I want to wish you continued success, and you are always welcome back on the show, sir.
John, I appreciate the opportunity to help your audience enjoys it.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.